Hello, everyone. We're live here. Tonight is the first live in English uh, with a very special guest, a friend of mine, Jeremy Levy. Some people know already, but for if you don't know, I'm doing two lives a week. It is on Mondays and Thursdays at 8 p.m. Brazil time. Today is we're doing a little earlier, but usually it's 8 p.m. And my idea behind these lives is to share music knowledge with as many people as we can, contribute to, bring musical knowledge to people who cannot be in São Paulo or in the United States, or people who cannot travel to study abroad, but they can, with the internet nowadays, have access to this type of information, right? So today the live is with Jeremy Levy. I'm going to invite him here.
Oh,
Hey, Jeremy.
hi, how's it going?
How are you doing, man?
I'm good.
Oh, thank you very much for accepting my invitation to participate here. And I'm sure this will be very inspiring for young composers, young orchestrators, or arrangers, and people who are going to work with this and want to know your work too. So thank you very much for participating.
I'm glad to be here.
Great. So, Jeremy, maybe you could start. Can you tell us a little bit about your background, how you started to compose or orchestrate? You're a trombone player, but how did you move from trombone to composition? And what kind of job have you been doing since you finished Miami? For people who don't know, we studied together at Miami. That's why I know Jeremy. We went to Gary Lindsay's program at University of Miami, Masters in Studio Jazz Writing program. So tell us a little bit about your background and what kind of things you've been doing.
Great. So I'll kind of start, I guess, at the beginning of this. So Douglas and I, we were down at University of Miami, and I believe we graduated in 2004.
Yeah.
And I was still playing trombone quite a bit. I was doing the writing program, so I was starting to get very heavily into writing and arranging down there, while still doing a lot of professional performing work, playing in shows and doing some touring. So after I graduated, I stayed around Miami for a couple of years and did some touring. I ended up playing trombone with Engelbert Humperdinck for a year and got to travel a fair bit of the world with that band. So that was pretty fun. And I saved up some money, which then kind of helped me move back to Los Angeles in 2006. So I moved out there with my main goal was to, really find any way really into the movie industry for writing, arranging, orchestration, any of the angles that were, kind of might have an opening. So I kind of took the main angle of getting into orchestration because that seemed to be sort of my strongest way to get in, I thought. So I got accepted into the Henry Mancini Institute out there, which is a month-long summer program. They take student composers. And you did that as well, didn't you, Douglas?
Yeah, I did it in 2003, Henry Mancini Institute.
Yeah, right. So you did it in 2003. I did it in 2006, which was the last year of the program at UCLA.
I think they're in Miami, right?
It is,
no,
yeah.
right?
It's a very kind of different thing now. They sort of like reformed the studio orchestra program in Miami. Yeah. It's like the branding of the Mancini Institute, but it was, when it was at UCLA, it was a full month-long scholarship program where they took a whole student orchestra and student composers, and you had lots of teachers and people coming in. Like I remember I did it earlier as a trombonist, and I got to study with Jerry Goldsmith, and it was, it's a pretty amazing experience.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, it was the same in 2003. It was the same.
Yeah.
Vince Mendoza was there.
Yeah.
And it was very, very nice.
Yeah, it's a great program. So I did that program for a month, and I moved out at the same time. So I'd driven out like the week before it started. I'd found like a little studio apartment in a guest house. So I kind of moved in while I was still at the UCLA dorms. So it provided like a nice little month-long buffer to kind of help me get set up out there. And then once I got out there, then it was just kind of, hit the ground running, trying to find a way to get started working, really. The first things I did is I kind of used some of my alumni connections and reconnected some people from the Miami program that were already out in Los Angeles, and they hooked me up with this guy, Tim Davies, who is a conductor and orchestrator and also a big band arranger. He's also a great drummer. So he had a big band in Los Angeles, and a friend of mine, Andrew Sinowick, who also did the program with us. Yeah. He's now this great session guitar player in Los Angeles, but he recommended I come check out Tim's band. So I went and saw him and kind of met with him after the show and kind of told him, my background, what I wanted to get doing in Los Angeles. And he gave me a few little opportunities here and there to get started. And a long story, but when we basically been working together for about 15 years now, doing orchestration on films and arranging for, the Metropole and National Symphony Orchestra, BBC Symphony, all sorts of these great, symphony pops bands. So that was kind of like, I guess, the short story of how I got in. I mean, at the same time, I was also playing professionally quite a bit. I was playing trombone in the Brian Setzer Orchestra for like the first 5 or 6 years in Los Angeles. And then I kind of got out of that because I needed to be in town, to be writing. So at some point, my playing opportunities really just kind of went away as I kept saying no to more and more things. And then at some point, I stopped being called for things.
So when you moved to LA, did you start writing already, or did you start playing trombone? What kind of gigs did you get when you first moved to LA?
I mean, really, all of the above. I mean, trombone probably paid the bills at first, just because it takes much longer to really get the writing thing up and running until you're actually making good money on it. So when I first moved out, I got set up in like some of the wedding bands out there. So I was playing on the weekends. Driving down to Orange County or out to Malibu to play, big weddings with, with cover bands and that sort of thing. So I was doing that. And then, like I said, I was doing the Brian Setzer band over the holidays. They would do these like month-long Christmas tours. So I was doing all that sort of stuff, some sessions here and there for some smaller stuff from home. And then Tim kind of gave me my entry into the orchestration world. So I started doing just MIDI prep and additional orchestration work with him and just sort of, your beginner grunt work and lots of transcriptions of orchestra recordings and just, anything you might need when you're working on a project. I kind of started filling in and doing all that kind of stuff. And then the first real break I got to do to actual orchestrate some for a live group was on the show Pushing Daisies, which Tim was orchestrating. I was helping with some of the MIDI stuff on that. And then I got it. I guess, fortunately for me, or unfortunately, I'm not really sure how this works, but Tim's wife went into labor like the night before our session. So I ended up orchestrating a whole episode while he was occupied having his child. So that was kind of my first way to get in, to get like a first real credit.
Yeah, that's very nice.
Yeah.
So, and now you have this amazing project, which is the Planets Reimagined, right?
Yes.
Let me hear this. The Planets, the original version, is from this time, I think, right, Jeremy?
Yes.
I'm not wrong.
That looks correct.
Yeah. So for people who like film scoring and orchestral music, of course, like many people know this piece of the Planets. It's very, very nice. It was used as a reference for film scores. Like it's being used as a reference for film scores for many composers. And Jeremy did this amazing job. He adapted, he rearranged and recreated the Planets for a big band. And he's going to talk about how this transformation was and the challenges he had and how he transformed the orchestral classical piece into a big band jazz style. And how do you want to start, Jeremy?
Let me talk a little bit sort of about the inspiration
Sure.
of how the whole project came up. Then maybe we can play the video of Jupiter to kind of set a kind of background of what the whole thing is about. But so the basic story. I've been a big band writer since the Miami days. Really since the beginning. I played in big bands in trombone. Since I was like in middle school. So it's my first love really is playing in big bands and writing big band music. So I wrote a big band album with my band leader friend, Alex Budman, that came out in 2012. It's a CD called From There to Here. And that was a CD of 11 originals and a couple arrangements. So that was my first record that I did with Alex, and then I was kind of looking for a follow-up because I wanted to do another record because they're fun to do and they're great to put something out in the world. So I was kind of looking for a project that I thought might be something interesting to either adapt or take some sort of like an existing musical property sort of that might be able to bring some attention to my arranging and my writing and see if I can get something to come from that. So that was sort of my idea. Then the idea for the Planets came about I actually saw the Planets being performed at the Hollywood Bowl here in Los Angeles. I think this is 2019. Another composer friend of mine. We went out there, and it's like a hot summer night, and it's beautiful music, and you just kind of notice, especially listening to Jupiter, which we'll talk about today, like just how much of film music has really been influenced by the planets. It was one of those pieces for me. I've gone back and I re-listened to it every few years and re-score study it, because you always find something new about it, something interesting. You find, I didn't realize this was sort of like a little reference for this movie. There's obviously Mars is such a sort of big reference to Star Wars. But then you see a little, like I said, like Jupiter, like it's got this big fanfare ending that's just very cinematic. And then just myself as an orchestrator for so many films now, you kind of see that like Holst, and especially maybe like for Prokofiev as well, but you sort of see like at this like early 20th century, the orchestration starts to change in the style where it becomes more like what we're seeing in film music, where it's not quite overly so romantic and not quite as florid as like Richard Strauss's tone poems. It's just a little more straightforward in the orchestration. And I think the Holst is really a great example of sort of how music is written now in a lot of ways. And then on top of that, the Holst, a lot of the harmony that he's doing is it's not jazz necessarily, but it's sort of jazz in the sense of how John Williams writes as having a jazz background, where I see a lot of times you'll have like, you'll have a pedal point, then you'll have harmonic blocks moving up and down and melody. It's this very specific style in a lot of ways. It kind of bridges between classical and jazz music, to me at least. So I thought there was going to be a lot of cool opportunities to adapt it.
Nice. So this was in 2019 then.
Yeah, the whole project was it took quite a while to get going. So yeah, I got the idea I think in 2019. Then I started writing over the course of 2019, and then let's see here. Well, actually, no, that might have been 2018. Actually, I'm trying to reference this to when things went dark during the coronavirus. But we recorded it before all the shutdown. So okay, sorry, that would have been 2018. Sorry, I've got this year off.
No, that's fine. So when you decided to do it, did you talk to the guys first and say, hey, let's do this, or did you start writing and sketching some ideas? How did you start putting it?
So I got the idea, and I just kind of started writing. So I wrote Mars first, sort of as a test case to see if it would work. So I kind of came up with this cool idea of doing it. It's like Afro-Cuban, kind of like hot jazz kind of thing. Kind of bring out some of the Miami stuff that I learned down there with how to write for, Latin percussion and montunos and some of the rhythmic elements you might do in that style. So I kind of did that adaptation of Mars and brought it in that style, wrote it. I thought it was pretty close. So I brought it into the band. We called a rehearsal, and it went really well. And then I just kind of thought, okay, let's finish this. So it took about 9 months.
So Mars was the test then. And
yeah, Mars was the test case.
That's good.
Yeah, we just ran it down at the rehearsal, and everybody liked it. I thought it was pretty cool. I thought, okay, I should see what I can do with the rest of this.
Right. Now, maybe we should show people a little bit of your work so they know what we're talking about. Like,
sure.
What do you want to show?
Well, we've got Jupiter pulled up on here. If you want to start with that, or I can also put Mars in if you want to hear that, since I just mentioned that one as well.
Thanks. Very nice, Jeremy. Very nice job. Congratulations.
Well, thanks, Douglas.
This is amazing, because you did not simply transcribe to Big Band, right? You put the improvisation there. I heard some during the sax soli that you put some other notes there that to give a jazzy sound, like some tensions, because Holst sometimes is kind of tried some of this part. Yeah, very, very nice, very nice. So can you tell us a little bit about your the challenge or the procedures that you used to adapt and make it sound jazzy?
Right. So honestly, the biggest struggle with this project was making sure that nothing sounded too jazzy in a lot of ways, because you can go from sounding kind of cool to sounding kind of lame very quickly if you're not careful. So you have to be you have to have a light hand in how you're interpreting it to a jazz feel or jazz harmony, because you can take it's one thing to just have a triad and then like add a six, and all of a sudden it sounds like a sax solo. But it can go bad real quick if you're not careful. For me, the biggest challenges was figuring out when to thicken a harmony, just away from triads. Some of it is sort of a transcription adapted into jazz. Obviously, then the rhythms are changed around, and a lot of other stuff is tweaked. And then other bits it's literally you take the melody and then you write a big band chart around that. So sometimes like we'll get into the first beat theme. We'll look at chorus in a moment, but basically I would take the melody and then write out the bass line, and then reinterpret it what harmony I wanted to use for the band on top of that. So sometimes it's literally taking like top line, you'd have the bass line that was written out in the holst, and then all the middle stuff is kind of up for grabs. And you can kind of base it on what's going on in the band or in the orchestra, but other times it requires a bit of a rethink of how you might want to write chord changes for certain things. So I sort of took that approach for a lot of it. And then, for all the movements, there's going to be some improvisation. So how do you put a jazz solo in the middle of, whether it's sort of a classical piece or more of like a through composed jazz orchestra piece? So that was always a bit of a challenge of finding a way to put in some improvisation where it feels warranted and not just like all of a sudden somebody's playing a solo on top of, on top of the material. So I took a lot of different approaches. On Jupiter, the approach I took was essentially building the solo on top of the middle section. The main thing, the da 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 da. Or no, sorry.
There's a drum solo also there, right?
The drum solo comes a little later, yeah. So yeah, there's a guitar solo over the middle section, and then over the cross section, I turned it into a drum solo, which I thought was sort of interesting. That was not even my original intention. They just kind of grew into that over how we were performing it.
That's really nice because you had like long notes there, da 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 dee da 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 da, and then the drums plays all those 16th and 8th notes, giving a little more movement to the
whole
long
section
notes
was
of the melody.
Yeah, I had like a good idea of how I wanted to do that, but then by the end, I think it turned out a bit more unique maybe than I had originally planned. Like the idea was it was going to be the sort of like thickened like Ray Schneider-esque harmony over the chorale section. So I started out. You take the melody. I figured out how I wanted to do it. It's written in 6/4 in there, but it's really 3/2. It's a big 3. I just wrote it in 6/4 because the quarter note stayed constant. I thought it would just be easier for jazz players to go from 4/4 to 6/4 instead of going to 3/2. So there's no weird sight reading confusion. But yeah, so I took the melody and the bass line, and again, like I said, I figured out how I wanted to do all the thickened harmony and the add notes and give it an interesting jazz sound, and especially a more modern jazz sound, not just sort of like the 50s and 60s harmony or Thad Jones harmony. I wanted to do something that sounded a bit more modern. So I kind of based it off of the kind of stuff that Marie Schneider does. And then once I had that, then the original idea was that the drums were just going to be kind of floating time, and then kind of doing some little ad-lib fills here and there, but I wanted it to be pretty loose. And then as we started performing it, I realized it would be usually more interesting to kind of turn into what starts as like an open-ended drum solo, then it just builds and builds until it finally kind of like settles into a bit of a groove. And I almost had it was like a double time feel at the end, so I kind of like really set it going into the next section. So it was definitely something where the performance of it affected how we ended up notating it by the end. So it went through a few changes of how I wrote it.
Nice, very nice. And for the chords, like if you have for the sax soli, for example, if you had triads in the original version, would you add 6th and 9th, or only 6, or sometimes 6, sometimes 9th, just to get a thicker sound?
Yeah, so, sometimes 6, sometimes 9, sometimes 7, sometimes I did a lot of add 4s for things that were just triads. I would sometimes do like this more like record type harmony where you add the 4th in there as well. So you've got the 3rd and 4th kind of sitting next to each other to get that kind of crunchy, modernish sounds. I did quite a bit of that. You hear that in some of the ensemble sections actually more than the sax solos. I feel like for the sax solos, you kind of have to keep it sort of in that traditional, like a minor chord becomes minor 7th, or a minor 6, minor 6/9, or some sort of that, depending on kind of the vibe of what's happening. Right. But if anything, in that section, the harmony kind of came together pretty quickly. The tricky part was just figuring out how to do the transitions. Let me pull up the scores, and I'll show you a couple of things that were kind of cool about that. So let's see here. See if I remember how to do this.
Share screen.
Yeah.
Then you choose the screen. Okay.
So okay, well, let me start with the, oops. Okay, so this is the original Jupiter. So you can see, like, right off the bat, like, one of the things they adapted, this, you know, the really well-known string, the 16th notes here, I kind of took that as little interjections with the saxes in the introduction, just because the thing that I thought was, like, most important when you're writing for a big band, you don't want to have things that are idiomatic for the orchestra that are not also idiomatic for the big band. So anything that didn't work in one genre to do the other, I found some way to reinterpret it or hint at it, but I didn't feel it was necessary to, like, you know, just like, you're not going to be doing, like, you know, swinging along here like a shuffle, and then you've got this all
the time, right?
Yeah. So I
had
to find a way for, I go, oh, I recognize that is what that's kind of referencing, but, you know, it's doing its own thing. Like, my idea sort of for the big band introduction was more like a Buddy Rich type thing, you know. So it's this like hard driving rock shuffle. Where's my mouse? There it is. All right, so let me get over here. So getting into, where is this? It's the 1st of March. I went too far, sorry.
Okay.
Oh, here it is. So the section here, this is the first, like, real change into the secondary theme in the original. So here's in a march. And then what I did in the big band version, I actually turned that into a waltz. And I had to do some kind of trickery to get into this feel. So here's the same thing. This is written as the sax solo, same thing. And I did adjust somewhat for the range, just because, you know, you don't have quite as much range from the violins as you do for the saxes. So I had to make a few adjustments here and there. But to get into this from the original feel, so we're in a 4/4 swing feel getting into this, and then all of a sudden we're going to a much faster jazz waltz. So I did a metric modulation to get into the new tempo and the new feel, so it feels seamless. So you'll see kind of what I did here in the drums. You'll see they start playing these triplets, so bump, 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 bump. And then those triplets become the new quarter notes and the waltz.
For the next measure.
Nice. Yeah.
Nice.
So it becomes a really natural way to get into the new tempo where you can play it, and, you know, you don't need a conductor. Nobody needs to count things off. You can just, the drummer can set everything up really easily.
Right.
And then you'll see coming out of this, I do the reverse. So now you see in the kick drum down here, you're doing these dotted quarter notes, which then become quarter notes again at the old tempo. So you get right back into the original feel again.
That's why.
Yeah, so it allows it to play down very simply. And honestly, if you're listening, you may not even notice that there's tempo change.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no need to much easier to perform without the conductor if you have those.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very nice.
Yeah, and then for the guitar solo, so what I did, you'll see kind of sets up. I kind of reverse engineered this as I was writing. So I think I started figuring out how I wanted to do the melody, the ba da 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 dee da dee da da da, you know, that theme from the original Jupiter. So I figured out how I wanted to write it out. So ba ba da 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 ba ba da 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 ba, and so on and so on. So I figured out the rhythmic version of how I wanted to do this as a swing figure. And then once I started writing it, then I kind of reverse engineered to get the guitar solo kind of getting into it. So we start with like a little stop time thing here with the rhythm section, guitars playing in between the fills, and then slowly the band starts coming in and adding more and more material until really you've got all the different layers of that section going over it as sort of backgrounds, sort of building up the guitar solo. And then eventually that goes into what is sort of, I wouldn't really call it a shout chorus because it didn't really work that way, you know, because you're using a different form from classical music, but it's sort of, you get the same idea, like a big, I mean, you know, a general big band chart is like you've got the melody, then you've got solos, then you've got some sort of like a shout chorus, then usually, was that you or me doing feedback? Sorry about that.
It's a door here.
Oh,
my dog came here, so she opened the door.
Right, and then anyways, after you do solos, then, you know, there's usually some sort of like a DC where you go back and play the melody again, and then like a coda tag ending. So this sort of almost works the same way, where you've got, you know, the original melody section, although there's multiple melodies, then you have the guitar solo, and then that kind of sends you off into the shout section / development. So you've got a big send off here, back into the 4/4 feel again with big high notes. Band comes back down, then we get into the chorale, which is sort of works almost like a development section.
So Jeremy, for the chord symbols for the guitar solo, did you add some chords there, or did you?
Yeah, I did quite a. I kind of made this a little bit more modal than it was originally. So I did this as a bit of a reharmonized thing. Here, let me get my piano here so I can hear the chords. So just, I guess it's probably too tiny to see what's actually going on there, but I did it as like a G4 chord to start like. So I'm basically doing that on the first 8. So going back and forth between G add 4 to, oh, I'm sorry, actually, that should have been G add 4 to F2. I should actually look at what I wrote. It's been a while. So it's a. Oh, yeah, that's right. And the voice makes sense. And this, essentially, the D minor 11 is just the F2 voicing with the D of the bass. Sorry, it's been a while since I've actually played through this on the piano. So you've got that feel. And then on the second back half, then it adds a walk up where it then goes to A bass. So. Oops. So you get some cool little harmonic bass movement here going on. So, but you're basically just doing these 2 chords back and forth in the right hand, and then you see some shifts in the bass line to kind of give it some different harmony. As it builds on, then at the end to get into the last section, let's see over here in this section, there's like a walk up in the bass line. So you've got the same harmonic motion between like the G4 to F2, but the bass is going.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So you have baritone sax, bass player, bass, baritone.
Yeah, pretty much all the bass instruments. Yeah. And then when we go back and do this on the second time around in the DC, the distorted guitar is also kind of doing that as well, doubling the bass line.
For that part, when the bass goes down, boom, 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 boom. How did you do that part? Which instruments are playing the bass line there?
I'm sorry, which part? Did I hear?
No. The other part went dum dum pum dum
Oh, the chorale.
There's a very nice bass line there going down. Boom, dum, dum, dum.
Yeah. So to get into the session, I'm doing like a pedal point. The muted guitar is playing muted pedal, just pedaling out on the G, playing muted there. So you've kind of got that going through it. So you got this G pedal, and then these like these kind of thick voicings.
Nice.
It's been a while since I've worked through this.
That's fine. This movement is the best in my opinion. This is the one I most like. Jupiter is amazing.
There's so many great themes here.
Yeah.
So this starts off with like the G pedal, and then you got this kind of like moving pedal harmony on top of it. It's a lot of it's kind of like E flat over G. So you get this kind of like crunchy stuff going on. And then it settles in here. The drum starts playing in time again, and then you got now just the bass line. So you've got basses playing, or the string bass playing the bass line, left hand piano along with like block chords. Then bari sax is done on the bass line, and then bass trombone is sometimes playing the bass line, sometimes just playing upper voicings. But it's mostly covered by just piano, left hand, and bass. Cool.
So if you had to name a few things that you had to do to adapt, to transform this original classical or orchestral classical music to this big band chart, what would be like metric modulation, the swing part, changing the swing part, adding the sixth, ninth, adding some tensions, adding improvisation? What would be some adaptations?
I mean, for me, the biggest thing is to not think about it as like you're writing, a transcription, or you're adapting an existing work as much as you're taking the melody, the harmony, the basics of the piece, but then you're writing a big band chart. And so I basically, like, for all the stuff, like that's how I write a big band arrangement. So I take that approach, but then I take it to this music. So it would be like if I'm arranging anybody else's tune, if somebody writes a song and asks me to arrange it, I try to take a similar approach. So that was really kind of how I tried to look at this as well. So I use, a lot of the approaches and tricks and techniques that I use in my own writing, and then I try to figure out how can I take that into the Holst world using those melodies and themes and harmonies. So I wanted it to be, authentic to the original Holst, but I also didn't want it to just sound like, it's not just a big band playing Holst. It needed to be its own thing.
Right. Like it was like it became an incredible job because you have your personality there, you have the jazzy part there, but you can still hear Holst there very, very clearly.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of sessions where the harmony is pretty accurate. Actually, if the other video we have loaded up here from Mercury, that one's actually, there's some really good examples of how that, like the opening of that is almost not note for note transcribed from the original orchestra, but like it's very closely just like adapted, and then I add rhythm to it, and then from there it expands out into improvisation and brings in a lot of new stuff, and then by the end we're doing all this much more interesting sort of like jazz orchestra type stuff on top of it. But it's got a really, I think, interesting mixture of just adapting Holst and then also bringing like what I do to the music.
Cool. You want to show something else?
Yeah, you want to play the other video I have posted in there?
Very nice. Very nice. It's Andrew there playing the guitar.
Yeah, he gets a little solo at the end.
Yeah.
I can stop that. There's this little credits thing on there.
Wait.
There you go. Okay. So there's just a little credit scene that was still playing.
Cool. So Andrew there, I haven't seen the guys for a long time. Andrew, the guys, Mark Danis. For you guys who are watching there, we can't see who is watching, but if you want to say hi, we'll see who is saying hi or asking any question or making comments here in the comments. So feel free to say hi. And Jeremy, how was the production? So you talked about the score and the writing process. What about the production part?
So this whole album took about 3 years start to finish. So it was about 9 months of writing in between projects. I'll be working on actual paid things, then I would get a little bit of time off, and then I'll go back to writing on this project again. So it took a decent chunk of time to do all 7 movements. And then we started rehearsing. I did a Kickstarter fundraising campaign to raise some money for the recording as well. So that was about, I think, 3 months we did to raise some money for it. And then I did a performance actually down in Miami with John DeVers running the band now. So he had me come down there and I rehearsed the band and we did a concert to kind of do a little premiere. And also it gave me some video and clips of it to kind of help me doing the promotion to raise some money for the recording project. And then we recorded the band over the course of 2019. So we recorded the rhythm section first. We did piano, bass, and drums all together at my drummer studio, Jamie Tate. So we did 2 days recording of that. And then Andrew did all the guitars at his home studio over 2 days.
So Andrew did the guitars before the horns?
I think a bit of both. I think we did. Actually, yeah. So we did 1 day of sessions before the band, and then we actually waited to do the second day to finish it off. I think after he did it, just because it worked out timing wise, just because he's a busy dude. But then we did 2 days of recording the band in a big studio at Hollywood Scoring here in Los Angeles. So they were playing to the pre-recorded tracks that the rhythm section was playing. So I kind of like doing it this way, even though you don't get necessarily the truest like live jazz performance out of it. But it gives you a really good opportunity to get the performance you want out of all the takes you've been doing. So you record the rhythm section and you do maybe 3 or 4 takes of each tune or something, and you've got lots of choices, and you can really figure out the production of how you want each one to sound, and how the direction of like the solos and the comping and what the drums are doing and all this sort of stuff. So you have all the time before you get to the band, so you can really get all the stuff locked in to be really good, and exactly how you want it. So I sort of produce all the rhythm section tracks ahead of time. Then once that's all mostly locked in, then I bring those in. We rented the big studio to do the horns, and then sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, and then after that, then it was like, another month or 2 of editing all the big band takes, which is very time consuming. Yeah.
So you had the rhythm section done, Then when you went to the studio, did you record all the winds together, or all the horns together? Or
Yeah, all together. Yeah.
By section? Oh, all together.
No, all together. There's a few things we had to strike out separately. I think we did, so like on Mercury, I think the Woodwinds did the opening section by themselves just because it's pretty technically difficult to get that really tight. So we gave the brass a rest while we just got those.
Did you use a click to record the rhythm section?
Yeah. So I had to prep clicks for everything ahead of time. So what I did, essentially I exported my notation file, put it into Digital Performer, and I brought in like very rough MIDI playback for the horns. That way, so you make a click track, audio click track for the players, and then it's also got like the back tracks of the horns. That way, they're sort of getting some sort of reference of what's going on when they're playing along to it to help out with hits and just getting the right vibe. And we'd rehearsed for a few days, like off and on for maybe like a month ahead of time to make sure everybody knew the music and was ready to go. So that was basically the process. Is rehearse, get familiar with it, and then for the rhythm section, we had click tracks and MIDI horns playing in the background just to kind of play along with for reference.
Cool. And when you recorded the horns, did you have each session in a separate room or all together in the same room?
No, we were all in the same room. Yeah, so it was a pretty long room. So we had saxes all the way at the far left, trombones in the middle, trumpets on the right. And
then one mic per instrument plus head overhead. So
spot mics on each instrument, and then I don't think there was a section mic. I think it was the individual spots, and then we had the decatry for the room. So we had I think we had two sets of stereo mics. There was like a small condenser, and then like up a little higher there was like a large stereo condenser. So we had different choices depending on the kind of sound. So I think one was a little brighter, one was a little darker, but you had some excellent sounds out of it.
Great, Jeremy. So Jeremy, we're almost finishing. What would you say to young orchestrators, young musicians? Any advice? Like what books to study, what scores to analyze, or what suggestions would you give them?
I'll do two. I mean, if you want to be if you want to learn about the big band stuff, I think the best book that I had studied that kind of got me into it and really understanding big band writing was Inside the Score by Raybert Wright. For me, that's I think the best of all of them. And Gary Lindsay's book is, of course, basically what we were being taught as well in pre-book form. But yeah, Gary Lindsay's book is very good. I can't.
Oh, by the way,
off the top of my head,
I have to say that Gary Lindsay kindly accepted my invitation to come here and talk next week. So he'll be here next Thursday, 8 p.m. Brazil time, talking about arranging and showing his sax quartet things. And
cool.
It will be very cool. So yeah, definitely Inside the Score is the best book in arranging for big band that I know.
Yeah.
Also.
And then as far as for orchestration, I mean, it's a tricky thing. I mean, as far as orchestration and like the media sense of what I do out here in Los Angeles, you need to have, Gary's here right now.
Gary's here. Nice, Gary. So nice you're here.
So doing film orchestration, it's a combination of knowing how to actually write for the orchestra, and then it's also a combination of understanding like all the technical stuff that's going on with computer demos and samplers and synthesized orchestration. It's really like kind of a different beast than you really kind of learn in school. Let's see, what's the question here?
Let's see the question.
Oh.
What do you think?
For me, the essential part of it is really understanding your own musical voice whenever you tackle a project like this. For me, that was very important that when I did this record, I wanted to sound like a Jeremy Levy arrangement that just happened to be the music of Gustav Holst. And I think I pulled that off. I mean, I certainly, at least in the writing side, I felt myself using a lot of the same tricks I did in some of my other charts where I'm sort of adapting other ideas that I've done and just putting it in a different light. So I sort of had like the things that I do that I sort of think defines my writing. I thought I pulled it off pretty well in the Holst stuff, where it still sounded like Holst, but also sounded like what I do. So I think that's probably the most important part, is just being confident in your own writing, and sort of what makes your own writing unique, and then bringing that to whatever you're working on.
Cool. So, Jeremy, what equipment do you use? What's your gear? What use Sibelius, right, to write?
Occasionally, I mostly use Finale. I did this in Finale. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't use Sibelius too much. I do if I work with another composer that uses Sibelius, but for the most part, I'm working at Finale. So yeah, I'm using that for notation. For sequencing, I use Digital Performer and Cubase. For editing and mixing, I use Pro Tools. Some other software that I use, there's a transcription program called Transcribe. I think it's by 7th String Audio. It's a really cool little program that it essentially is, it shows the waveform up on your screen, and then you can like click on like measure numbers and beats, and it's very easy to kind of like keep track of like when you're doing pops arrangements. That's usually what I use. Where like I'll put the audio file up there, and then I'll click it out so it's got all the measure numbers that line up with my with my notation file. And then, it has like all the slowdown functions. So you can go, 75% speed, 50% speed, 25% speed, or whatever you want to do. So it sounds pretty decent even at the low tempos when you do that. And then it's also got some like really cool like EQ filtering options where if you just want to hear just like, sorry, my hands are off screen, just like these low frequencies or just these high frequencies, you can do these filters to really pick out certain bits of the audio. So it's a very helpful tool if you're having to transcribe music.
Nice. So any other question? Anyone wants to ask another question? Gary? I'm so happy Gary hears, man. Gary's here. Yeah. Well, if we don't have any other question. Okay, guys, I know most of my audience don't speak English, so I'm going to find a way to add closed captions, to add subtitle in Portuguese, and also I'm going to find a way to add subtitle in English to my Portuguese videos, because there are some very nice videos in Portuguese, and I'm going to find a way to add English subtitles, right? So next Monday, 8 p.m. Brazil time, it will be with me. And then next Thursday, it'll be with Gary Lindsay, who was our teacher, our advisor at University of Miami. Gary did an incredible, he's retired now, but he just retired, but he did an incredible job for many, many years, and teaching and helping many, many musicians become better writers, better arrangers. Gary has a question here.
We talked about this a little bit earlier, but I mean, I guess this kind of gets across to, it's really context dependent on like what kind of harmony you're able to do. Like if it's a major chord, a lot of times I'll add like the fourth, like I mentioned. So like, for a C triad, it might be like that. So you have the fourth in there to get kind of a crunchy sound. And then, like another trick is to do like first inversion. So now you've got like an extra sound to play with, and then once you have that sound, you can also use that as a substitution for E minor. So instead of then you have that sound instead. So you can take this. This is something that Gary taught me a lot. Is you have these sort of actually this combination of Gary and Ron Miller actually, where you have like a really big grip, either like a triad or something like this, and then you can take different chords by doing different bass notes. So put over E, and you've got like an E minor, like an interstitial E minor, put over G, or you get lots of different pedal point sounds, but just by playing the same shape in the right hand with a different bass note.
So sometimes you use the pedal point on the bass, but sometimes on the harmony. So you have like 3 or 4 notes being repeated all the time, but changing the bass, so you have different colors, right?
Yeah, I mean, that was sort of what I did at the beginning of the chorale, where the guitar is just pedaling out on that G, and then you've got the band playing these like tight voicings going up and down, moving around it. Which is, and honestly, a lot of that's coming out of the whole stuff. Like you'll see, he does a ton of that in Mars, where you essentially have, there's the 5/4 ostinato going on,
the G pedal,
and then the harmony,
C pedal.
Right? Then the harmony is just like these minor triad just going up and down over the pedal. So there's all the stuff that's happening, in like the 1900s. Then we kind of adapted to jazz, and then I'm readapting it back to classical with a sort of a jazz twist.
Cool. So Jeremy, I want to say congratulations for your amazing job. It was took you 3 years, and luckily you did it, because it's amazing. Like so many people like the host composition, and so many people who like host like jazz too, and I'm sure you did a very, very important work to leave it there for many people to study and listen to. So congratulations, and thank you very much again for accepting my invitation. And I hope to see you soon. If you have time, come watch Gary's live. I'm sure it'll be nice too.
Hope to watch it.
Cool. So bye-bye, everyone. See you Thursday, 8 p.m. Brazil. Bye, Jeremy. Thank you very much.
All right. Bye, everyone.